Everyday Americans and others around the globe are being bombarded with news about the coronavirus, especially to the number of new cases and where they're located. While we humans have an obvious and natural desire to avoid sicknesses and be protected from the unknown, we also have a propensity to be gullible and to allow government to act outside of its limitations during what may be deemed extraordinary times. We'll look at the propensity of government abuse and how the deep state may use the coronavirus in this episode of Analysis Behind the News, where we provide the perspective that you can use to help save American liberty and independence. Suffice it to say that we're not scientists or doctors, so take this commentary with that knowledge. Rather, we are students of history, especially regarding the proclivities of government abuse. So we present our review of the coronavirus from that standpoint. Hollywood has done a great job on the American psyche with assembling doomsday movies that depict threats to human civilization, usually setting up a scenario in which government comes in to either save civilization or to greatly aid the efforts of some hero. This has helped to prepare us for what should be done when similar scenario arises. Perhaps we may call that conditioning. History has also set precedents in using the often exaggerated fears of many to persecute the minority. You might remember the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II on American soil, or the militarized takeover of American manufacturing during the same war. This attack on liberty was done under the guise of security in an effort to defeat a common enemy. A similar attack on American liberty was also done just after 9/11, causing levels of American liberty to plummet. Government has a propensity to use crises to expand its scope, its size, and to tighten its grip on power over its own people. Knowing this, let's get beyond the hysteria of the media to look directly into the epicenter of where the coronavirus began, in Wuhan, China. Let me read to you an account of what is going on in China. So thenewamerican.com reported this last month. On January 23, 2020, 11 million people were taken captive. On that day, the Communist government of the People's Republic of China decided to quarantine the entire city of Wuhan in response to the spread of a coronavirus that appeared to have originated there the previous month. In a single day, China's seventh largest city was effectively turned into a vast open-air concentration camp with all air, rail, and road traffic out of the city ended. Over the next few days, the quarantine was extended over a number of other nearby cities. By January 25th, almost 50 million people, a population roughly equivalent to the combined populations of California and Georgia, were under quarantine, prevented by their government from leaving their cities. In Wuhan, all cars were banned from the downtown area, and city authorities rushed to erect a makeshift hospital to accommodate an anticipated influx of patients. The American government managed to evacuate its consular staff and many American citizens from Wuhan. Quarantines have been practiced for centuries, but never before on a scale anywhere near what is being carried out right now on the Chinese mainland. The Chinese government is methodically shutting down many forms of travel all over the country, prohibiting all group tours, for example. Tens of millions of Chinese have canceled vacation plans during the Chinese New Year holiday. Millions of breath masks have been sold, and the streets of most major cities are practically empty. Those people who do venture out mostly wear surgical masks. Anyone with flu or cold-like symptoms is subject to involuntary quarantine. In a word, panic and mass hysteria fanned by the actions of the government are the order of the day. Now, knowing that the Chinese Communist government does not value human life, given that it was responsible for nearly 50 million deaths, possibly many more, of its own population, why would the Chinese government even care about a possible pandemic? Perhaps it isn't the pandemic that they're concerned with, but rather what they can do with it. But before we jump into that, let's learn more about the risk the coronavirus poses. TheNewAmerican.com reported in the same article that in spite of the scary sounding name, it is essentially a type of common cold, albeit one packing a little more punch than the usual varieties. So far, it is unclear whether this particular strain is even as dangerous as the annual influenza bouts that take a predictable global toll on the aged and infirm. Nearly every known victim so far has been over 60 years old, typical of influenza and other pathologies that often induce pneumonia and other secondary infections in those with weakened immune systems. Added to this, little known outside of China, that most Chinese do not understand that relationship between keeping warm and avoiding or mitigating illness. Many Chinese believe that fresh air, even in the dead of winter, is a key to good health. Consequently, the first thing that the Chinese do when a person falls ill, at home or in hospital rooms, is open all the windows, even if the outside temperature is below freezing. Many Chinese also despise artificial heating because it dries out the air and is allegedly bad for the skin. Thus, in China, a rather unique combination of cultural aversion to inside air and to indoor heating has created optimal circumstances for the spread of diseases such as influenza and the Wuhan coronavirus during the cold Chinese winter months. So here we have an environment that promotes the spread of illness in China. So how concerned should we be about it in this country? Well, let's put a little bit of perspective on it. According to its website, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control estimates that influenza has resulted in anywhere between 9.3 million and 45 million illnesses, between 140,000 and 810,000 hospitalizations, and anywhere between 12,000 and 61,000 deaths annually in this country since 2010. So far, the coronavirus, according to the World Health Organization, has confirmed less than 100,000 cases and about 3,100 deaths worldwide. As the CDC website claims, your chances of getting it are very low. You are more apt to get the flu, and those who are on the extreme ends of the age spectrum are more susceptible to dying from the flu, along with those who have a compromised immune system or some other underlying health problem. Now granted, the numbers coming out of China are not to be trusted. The Epoch Times suggests that reporting figures from China may be substantially off. Yet these figures still pale in comparison to the flu stats. However, the deep state usually does not let a crisis go to waste and is certainly helping to ramp up this perceived crisis by exploiting the public's fears of the unknown. This is why you see an ongoing flood of information pouring out of the media establishment regarding the latest coronavirus cases. But how often do you see these stats reported in context with flu stats, which so far are much worse? And listen to the rhetoric of those in the highest levels of government right now. They are so concerned about this that they are willing to sacrifice as much American liberty and taxpayer dollars as possible to stop the spread of this virus. And this, folks, is on both sides of the political aisle. And does that sound familiar? Many of these are also the same folks that think we can stop the weather from changing by drastically changing our way of living and by heavily taxing us based on the size of our carbon footprint. In China, the communist government has taken full advantage of this crisis by cracking down on its population, using the reasoning that the virus must be stopped at all cost. The Epoch Times has chronicled some of this. And if you're not familiar with the Epoch Times, this is a relatively young media outlet that is founded in New York City by Chinese Americans that are also anti-communist. They have posted several videos on Twitter recorded in China that highlight Chinese government actions, including large-scale outdoor spraying of what looks like disinfectants. It is not known what is being sprayed exactly and if it actually does any good or harm. Another video shows Chinese police welding shut the front door to a building that is under quarantine. Another shows a woman being forcibly separated from a child so that she can be quarantined. In addition, you may have also seen a video supposedly from a Chinese woman in China who goes off on a rant saying that she is so sick of the oppression and that the epidemic is merely being used to bring in money. And there appears to be some truth to that, according to another video posted by the Epoch Times on Twitter. A 15-second video purports to show that the Chinese government agencies in charge of collecting and distributing medical supplies for combating the virus are allegedly selling the supplies to citizens for profit. Reports have also surfaced that Chinese political dissidents are being targeted and pulled from their homes for quarantine purposes. While this is happening on the other side of the globe, we need to be vigilant about that here, as government throughout history has used quarantine more as a weapon of control than a tool for combating disease. In times when there are no large-scale disease threats, the thought of being confined anywhere is repugnant to anyone who loves liberty. However, during times when risk of disease on a mass scale is much higher, we tend to allow it as we think it is for the greater good. And folks, the coronavirus has not created a need for forced quarantines. It is governments and the media that are blowing this way out of perspective. So let's not get caught up in the mass hysteria, but rather use common sense and good hygiene habits to avoid common sicknesses. And one last point. The coronavirus has done some good, and that is to make Americans question the dependency that we have upon China. Our dependency upon a communist country whose ruling party sees America as the enemy and places little value on human life other than seeing it as cheap labor is contrary to the advice our founding fathers gave us regarding honest trade and commerce, entangling alliances with none. Yet, our dependency includes foreign-made pharmaceutical ingredients. According to Material Handling and Logistics, the U.S. is currently home to about a quarter of global production capacity for active pharmaceutical ingredients. Many pharmaceutical manufacturers turn to China and India to create and supply active ingredients. Since 2018, those active ingredients have become contaminated with a potential carcinogen that has gone into popular heart and stomach medicines, forcing many recalls and halting sales. America's drug supplies are open to shortages when such a dependence is upon foreign manufacturers. And let us remind you that China is also a main supplier of rare earth metals as well as other components that our military needs for manufacturing weapons. SupplyChain247.com reported last week that an online survey carried out by the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics on January 28th and 29th with hundreds of respondents shows that while some firms are largely in wait-and-see mode at this early stage of the outbreak, many are starting to map out a strategy to deal with the crisis and have initiated countermeasures. Now, these are mostly large manufacturers, distributors, and retailers. The site also reported, in the U.S., a serious supply chain-related concern is that the country will run out of certain crucial products. For example, while many life-saving products are assembled and finished in the U.S. or Europe, China is the world's largest producer of active pharmaceutical ingredients. Some of Apple's Chinese suppliers are expected to extend closures beyond the Chinese New Year. Starbucks closed half of its Chinese outlets. McDonald's and KFC announced closings. Google closed its China offices, and in a sign of a light at the end of the tunnel attitude, U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross observed that the Chinese outbreak may help bring more jobs to the U.S. And they conclude it's too early to draw definitive conclusions about how the coronavirus outbreak will impact global supply chains. However, the survey indicates that companies are watchful and concerned, as they should be. Folks, as we have mentioned before, there's so much more to Made in the USA than just a label. It means jobs here. It means products here. It means a much more stable supply chain. and it means more independence and less dependence from worldwide distributions. It means more peace of mind. So you can see that those who want to control you will have an easier time to do so when you are at your most vulnerable. And we get this from having fear of unknown. Now, Bill Sardi at LouRockwell.com wrote an intriguing article titled, "Why I Want to Be Infected with the COVID-19 Coronavirus and You Should Too." He puts the coronavirus in a much needed perspective, including asking the question if and when a vaccination is available, will you let fear drive you to get inoculated instead of allowing your body to produce natural antibodies to it if you come into contact? Now, those most interested in controlling you are creating pressure and hype over this, ensuring that a crisis does not go to waste. The deep state is most certainly ramping up efforts to mobilize government at all levels to combat this newest perceived bubonic plague that is yet to live up to the contrived hype. Again, let's use some common sense and be discerning about facts of the coronavirus. Be vigilant to the cause of liberty by not letting government, its deep state bureaucracies, or its lackeys in the media convince you to give up liberty for temporary security. To follow this issue from a liberty perspective, head over to our news magazine's website at thenewamerican.com. And don't miss our daily top headlines by signing up for our free email that is sent Monday through Friday. And please like and share this video with others. And until next time, we'll see you then.